Hello, antique and vintage lovers. Behind me is the entrance to Jewel Antique Mall, and it really is a jewel. There's some lovely things in there, and this was founded by some really lovely people. Len and Jan are friends of mine. I was a dealer here for a long time. I just think they're wonderful, and I actually found those letters that they put on the wall. All right, we're walking into the first room here, and here is a very cool horse lamp. Again, you know, I like those Venetian blind shades. That's priced at $125. Gotta have a little bit of shiny, brighten stuff out for Christmas, of course, too. Each of these rooms is a different dealer, and it's a neat building. I thought at first maybe it was an old motel, but it actually was an office building at one time. So there's lots of little rooms, which is pretty convenient if you're needing to set up an area so that people can see distinct things and make a statement. So each dealer has their own way of doing that. This platter is quite fine. This is Victorian, and since we're just about at Thanksgiving while I'm filming this, we'll look at the back. It does have a pattern mark, Alma. Now this would have been before 1891, but we don't see registry marks, so in all likelihood this is quite a bit older. The polychrome in English ironstone really starts to come about, oh gosh, the 1860s approximately, and I would say this dates to about that time. It's priced at $175. With all the interest in white ironstone currently, I have a feeling that these colored pieces, just as they followed the white ironstone in history, will also start to follow in collectability. The classic Camargue salt and pepper shaker, SP. Royal Dalton made a lot of dinnerware patterns, and they made very nice quality, but they somehow have not gotten the cachet of some of the other better quality English companies, with the exception of this pattern and a few others. This one is Lowestoft Bouquet, and this pattern is pretty well known and pretty widely collected. This was made in 1940 to 1948, meaning mostly not during the war years when the chemicals needed for the paints were taken out of production. So the reason people know it is because it would have been something you would have seen in early post-war America. This next room here, I like the windows because you can put your glass in and get some nice color through them, but this next room has some really pretty Victorian furniture. And I'm trying to highlight Victorian furniture when I see it because we are seeing interest in a younger generation in things that are fancy, and this definitely qualifies. This lamp here with the stand in brass is going to be 1890s. It would be considered an opera lamp because I'm sure this is adjustable. You can always look at the knob to get an idea of where these were made, whether they were made in America or made in England or made elsewhere. The shade is all hand painted. This is priced at $6.95. The chair next to it with the arms has a nice deep back. That's partly because Victorian women had bustles behind them, and so they had something to lean back upon. So they wanted a deeper seat. That actually works out well for today because those people were quite small. And you could imagine where a seat might have been very shallow for modern use. But because of that, this actually is something you could use today, and it is priced at $250. And then this is very nice, mahogany from about 1900, 1910. It has some nice fruitwood tracery that you see, and the marquetry with the leaves. This piece, this little settee, is priced at $3.95. And again, this is one that's actually usable because it's got the depth. It also doesn't have a lot of scroll work on the back that would be uncomfortable to lean upon now. The vase in the middle here is Staffordshire, and you notice it has a clock on it, although the clock is rather faded because that was gold paint. And these are 160 years old now on average. So because of that, you're going to see some fading, but this is in really pretty good overall shape. I see one chip on his hat. And if you like fancy, well, Capo di Monte might do the trick for you. These pieces are a 1950s or 60s set. They have the original shades with the drapery poles. You'll notice in here that this top piece is so heavy and so elaborate that to make sure that it wouldn't fall so that all those delicate pieces wouldn't break, they put a big bolt in here. This little corner vitrine is nice because it would take up a space that in a lot of houses is otherwise wasted. It has two pieces of Delaware pattern patterned glass from the 1890s. This one has a metal bale to use as a basket. And you see it in the red. And then you see the same piece down here in the green. The vitrine is really quite well priced. It does have a hand-painted apron. This is likely to date to the first part of the 20th century. It would be from France. It's priced at $5.95. There definitely was a time I would have expected to see these go for over $1,000. So since there is a new generation starting to look for things that they can mix with new items that are plainer, for example, well, if you wanted one fancy accent in the corner of the room, this would do it. The mirror is actually quite nice as well. The shaping on the top looks like something you would expect to be late Victorian, and it does have a gap between my finger and the glass, meaning that it is a thicker piece of beveled glass, so that is Victorian or early 1900s, but they are saying it is actually early, so I agree with them. I think it's probably 1880s or 90s. They have it priced at $3.95. There really are a lot of beautiful things in this mall. I would say this mall tends towards the pretty. The glass stein is an interesting piece from about 1900 with the hand painting. Here we have a bunch of the gold pieces of Picard china. Now this is something that you can still find out in the wild, because a lot of these were done in this gold in the 1940s and 50s. Picard had a history of decorating other people's porcelain starting, I believe, about 1910. They were competitors with the Durand Company, and originally they would have very elaborately hand-painted centers with flowers or fruit or other designs surrounded by gold. It was a way to do in porcelain what Tiffany and Steuben were doing in glass at the time. In later years, they went to an all-over floral brocade with a gold leaf paint over the entire thing. There was also the Wheeling Company who did this. Picard was out of Chicago, and they did these fine china pieces up until at least the 1970s. These are 20th century mantle lusters, but what great colors. It's Bohemian glass. The brightness of the paint in the flowers is what makes me feel quite certain that these are a 20th century rather than a 19th century set, but they're just beautiful, and they are priced at $6.95. And isn't this guy cute? Now this is stoneware. This is actually from the modern era, because this is a company named Poole in England, and some of the Poole stoneware lines are definitely looked at by modernists as an area to collect. There is their label on the back. I like the inscribed work on this. Lots of detail. Well, here's something that's rather uniquely Floridian. Now, this is probably going to date to the 1980s or 90s, looking at the color scheme. The mark on it is Milagro Studio Gecko Mike. Interesting studio mark. This is priced at $58. It's quite heavy and substantial. As an art piece, it's kind of neat. You could definitely see this in Santa Fe style of the late 80s, for example, which, believe me, that's going to come back too. It was very popular for American artists as well as European artists to go to the streets of Paris or the canals of Venice and paint impressionist pictures. Some of them are very good. We don't necessarily know who some of these artists are now, however. So this has a great look, great colors. If this takes you to a place that is calm and reflective, like the painting in the water, well, this might be for you. It does have a signature, but this is not a listed artist. Lots of people who did very good work do not become commercially successful as artists and are not necessarily known in the secondary market, and that's why this very large painting is only $225. It should date to the 1950s. The book trough here, this is a bookcase based on a Georgian design. This is a 1940s era reproduction of Georgian English mahogany. And of course you would file your books this way, so they were easy to get to and you could see the titles very easily. And then you still have a display shelf or a place for bookends. It has an X stretcher underneath so that it can hold all of that weight and still have some delicacy and be cleaned underneath. So for those reasons, this could be a useful thing for a book collector. It's priced at $325. There is some modernism in this store as well. This is Art Hamilton. This is a listed artist. Again, I like the intaglio work that gives you that sort of etched appearance. The Nude Women by Art Hamilton from 1978 is priced at $350. Now I'm holding this up to the fluorescent light so you can see Alexandrite glass. In the fluorescent, it has this lavender look. Now let's take it to the natural light of the window, and you'll watch that it turns to a bluish cast. It's a different sort of color changing effect, and if you rig up a showcase just right, you can use natural bulbs and fluorescent bulbs and show it off. You can even have it flash between the two and have it change color while you watch. Well, they just told me that this is a younger dealer who is a viewer and enjoys the show. So, Ashley the dentist, this one's for you. I'm glad I got to show your space. Up on the top shelf, speaking of modernism, we have these very fun flying geese. And then behind we have the Hager couples. The tall black dancers back to back are $40, and the ones in the embrace are also $40. Those are pretty good prices for Hager. It is really starting to appreciate because people are starting to appreciate it, and it's definitely a 1980s look. Now that vase I just took out of the way, which looked pretty good there actually, was a later mark of Belleair in the gold, but it's a nice shell vase, and $30 is certainly a reasonable price for that too. Below, I think this is really fun. This looks like something right out of the 1960s. It's $55. She's holding a flower pot around the edge. I like it. I'm guessing that maybe it's the Highland Company because we see a lot of Highland in the southeast and it does have that white glaze, but I'm not absolutely certain. I have not seen this piece before. And then right in the middle is this very pretty, and I think I'll leave it because it's tight in there, but I think it's well displayed because she's got the other purples around it. This is Bristol glass. This is 120 or 130 years old, and it's only $16. I think Bristol glass is such a deal if you like hand-painted glass. And then this tile that has that same lavender to it is hand-painted. This is made in USA, which surprises me. I actually expected this to be Italian because of the scene and the era. This looks like it's something that an artist did about 1970. Here's a bunch of Wexford, but it's in the smoke color. You really don't see the smoke color as much, and frankly, it gives it a richness that is just a lot nicer than the clear, in my opinion. I'm not one of those who doesn't like clear glass, but in this particular line, I think this really is just classier somehow. The candlesticks down here are Rosenthal Netter. There's the label. These were made in Italy. It was one of a number of importing companies around 1970. And yes, they are related to Vistosi, and that's why they're $120 for the pair. That is definitely a label to look for because not everybody knows that Rosenthal Netter has the capacity to be good or have had good designers work for it. Then we have a big ironstone piece here. This one I believe is more recent vintage because it's thinner and lighter, and it's made in Italy. It's definitely done in the Victorian style, but I like the dog handle. That's a little bit of humor you see in the 1970s that also, besides the lightweight nature of it, will help you identify the 20th century from earlier pieces. Older than you brass oval box. Okay, well, let's test that theory. Is it older than me? It's fairly lightweight, and it's tin lined. That makes it pretty tough because the tin not being visible on the bottom means we can't really see the oxidation to compare the inside where it was sealed with the outside to give us a better clue for age. So I'm just going to have to take their word on it that this dates back to older than me. The cast iron Shriner figure is a classic from the 1920s or 30s. They would have, oh yes, definitely 1920s. They would have given these out at conventions as little coin holders or desk caddies, and it's priced at $97. One of the cute early pieces of McCoy is this 1930s Three Little Pigs planter. It's actually very shallow, so you might have been able to use it for napkins or paper on a desk as well, and the price on that is $27. Oh, there's my very distant cousin Theodore Roosevelt on a blue and white plate. These are made by Roland and Marcellus. They have that nice deep bowl. They were made in England, but they were sold in America as souvenirs of various places and various people. There's one for Hudson. I believe that was the Hudson Fulton celebration, which was the equivalent of a Small World's Fair held in 1907. But then because we're in Florida, we have to see a piece of Hull Ebbtide. I just love this pattern. It seems so exactly on point with 1950s Floridiana. They do have a dealer who has some interesting stones, including fossil gems. There's a piece of amylite from near Calgary, priced at $119. If you're a rock hound, more and more antique malls are seeming to have things made of stone. And I think that's great. Stone is obviously an ancient material, so it seems legitimate. And there's some information about this outfit. Now we're coming into the back room. This is where I used to have a space, and I only gave it up because traveling so much and having to watch out for family made it impossible to keep up. Here's this mauve agate by Hager. The two vases with the bows are $45 each. The basket, which is quite large and prominent, is $65. There's definitely a new generation of people interested in mauve agate by Hager. Look how sweet this is. A little girl's dress with her little shoes and the hat. And you can tell that there was a lot of handwork done on this. It's not all machine lace. A lot of sewing, a lot of applying. This was definitely for stepping out at Easter, probably in the 1920s or 30s, I would say, looking at the material used. It's priced at $95. Very sweet as a display. Uncle Sam Nutcracker, that's a different one I haven't seen before. A lot of these were done in Japan, I believe, as novelties in the 1960s and 70s. This one does not have a paper label, but I'm pretty sure that's where it heralds from. It seems like a good deal for what it is. I have to admit I love chenille. This looks like a nice older piece. The fringe seems right. They have reproduced chenille recently, so you have to be careful if you see rounded ends. That can be suspicious. Look for tags. But this one's definitely older, and this one is a full, priced at $55. I always like these patterns. This is the Homer Laughlin Riviera blank, and this is the Mexicana pattern. This piece was made in 1944, according to that date code. It's hard to find this in good shape because that transfer decal did wear over time, and this one is priced at $18. This is actually Mexicana Hacienda. The Mexicana has the red rim and the pottery bowls. If you're enjoying this video, please do hit the thumbs up, and please click that bell to be notified of future videos. Oh wait, you're not subscribed? Then you can't do that, so please subscribe. Noritake made really good fine china. Unfortunately, a lot of these transferware patterns are hard to sell. The reason this pattern might sell, though, is not just its completeness and that it's priced at $295, which isn't bad for all these pieces, but because this is one of their pre-war patterns that you do not see quite as often, and oftentimes have a little more variety of pastel colors if you like that. This is marked made in Japan. That's how we know it's before the war. After the war, it would have just said Japan, or occupied Japan between 1947 and 52. My friend Joyce, who works here, originally lived in Atlantic City, and her dad ran the taffy shop on the boardwalk. And she's a really neat lady. She is not here today, or I'd introduce you, but she does have this wonderful thing in her case. This is a set of beverage thermometers. The green spot tells the time to tip for cocktails, Collins, coolers, lime, orange, and lemonades, highballs, beer, and soft drinks. They should always be served at their proper drinking temperature. It's a scientific fact. I think this is just great. Ohio Thermometer must have just really been pushing to figure out how to sell stuff during the Depression, and I don't know if they sold very many of these. I've never seen one before. It's priced at $165. Did you realize that lemonade has to be served at a particular temperature or else you might die? Lots of people are familiar with Wade figurines from Red Rose Tea, and the little animals are very popular and very widespread. But of course, Wade wasn't stupid. They were doing that to introduce you to their line so that then they could sell you their collections. And one of the collections they made that's popular now is the Wade Nursery. And that's got Humpty Dumpty, the Pied Piper, Baa Black Sheep, Little Jack Horner. It's got other characters as well. And there are people who really look for these. The gingerbread man is actually the most expensive in the group. With the return of tea parties, these Wedgwood tea sets and teapots are starting to sell again. $125 for the deep cobalt, which is one of the most popular colors. And they say jewel tones are going to come back this year. And then we have the light blue at $89. This Lenox bowl at $55 is a good price. That fountain, it's upside down because they're trying to show you the Lenox signature, but that fountain pattern is very popular. It's called Lido, and it dates to about 1970. And then the vase in between there is a Roseville Donatello from about 1910. Another Donatello piece in that bowl. And then that tall vase in the center with the hand painting is Royal Nippon from about 1910. Very pretty floral painting, and I like the panes. That's to be reminiscent of Tiffany stained glass of the period. So this was a higher quality product when it was made, priced at $195. And then here's the Dutch tea set from Roseville. This is perhaps part of the juvenile lines. I'm not certain about that. But the Dutch patterns were very popular around 1920, and this is priced at $175. And here we have a yellow-green pattern glass bowl from the 1890s. This is the original OG uranium glass. They used uranium to get this bright yellow color. This was a molded piece because they were finding out by then that the hand-blown pieces seemed to be making the workers very ill, which was true. They did not understand being exposed to uranium, and breathing it in when you were glass blowing was a terrible idea. But they started to figure it out, so you see pressed pieces that could be done in a room by a machine off by itself. And this is a wonderful collection here. These are all Roseville mugs from about 19-teens to about 1920. The red monk, should auld acquaintance be forgot, because otherwise, you know, well, monks and beer go way back. The elks, and you notice the clock is at 11 o'clock, because at the 11th hour, if you're an elk, you know the rest of that saying. The goat on the back in that mug there, if I can bring it in, is butting in. That's very cute. I haven't seen that one before. And then, of course, there's more of the Dutch pattern. And even these religious scenes, it looks like a series probably having to do with Christ going to the cross. My friend Judy has always had a bright, happy space back here, and well, she certainly has happy today, and I wanted to show these because you will sometimes see these in the wild still. They're 1930s vintage. The colors are fired on the glass. They're not actually in the glass. This is Anchor Hocking, and this was the rainbow set from the 1930s. If you couldn't afford Fiesta ware, it was inexpensive to buy glass and treat it this way. And so these were very popular for a time. Now, they can scratch if you treat them badly, and they shouldn't be dishwashed over and over, but otherwise you can pretty much use it all the time, and it's $55 for the set. Lido, Matchbox, even the Chevron company have had these very well-made die-cast redos of old trucks and old early horseless carriages done. Corgi did it. A lot of companies have. They're very good quality. The people who understand and collect these cars are largely not with us anymore, and because of that, the prices on these have stayed pretty flat around $10. A little bit of local interest here. That van tells me that this came from St. Pete when people were just starting to really move down here in the 50s. $25, Allied Van Lines. Yes, they would give you this little dustpan. It's got a handle on it, and their advertising was there so that as you swept, you could be reminded that you had stuff in storage and you better pay your bill. This very happy orange fish is Metlock's pottery from about 1970, and it's an ashtray. It's got the original sticker, Metlock's Manufacturing Company. Metlock's made really great stuff, and they actually did very well in the 1970s and 80s. If it wasn't for a divorce in the family, the company would have probably survived as long as Treasurecraft did. This vase here is not really a vase because it's ground on the inside, and that means it was meant to have a stopper. It was done by Rainbow Glasses, a little decanter. Now, they've got it priced fine at $20, but if it had the stopper, it'd be a $50 or $60 piece. But to me, the deal of the day has to be this metal tea card. I know it's been repainted. You can tell because the wheels have been sprayed. They're white instead of clear or black. But I don't really even care because the overall condition is good. They've covered up any rust. It's got good design. I don't believe it's Edward Woodard. I'm sure it's another metal company that did stuff in the style they saw selling around 1970, but it's only $45, and these are so useful for display. If by some miracle it lasts until I get back down here for the season, I will buy it from her. The ball pitchers, like the rainbow you saw, eventually gave way to this shape, by the 1960s, 70s, even early 80s, and these pastel lines came out. This is also Anchor Hawking, $40 for the set. Pastels are coming back. I think it's a good time to be looking for these sorts of things. And speaking of the 80s, this table has a great look. I like the metal corners. It's etched in the middle, and it seems to have some sort of an asymmetrical design. And it is signed. It has an artist's signature right there. It's priced at $4.95. Signed pieces of glass and lucite from the 1980s are definitely selling, and that's why you see prices like this. Here are two pieces marked fine, very thin glassware, and that's absolutely right, because this is Bimini Werkstatt. You can tell by the shape of the bottom. I bought a piece like this for $12 at the Springfield show. It's very easy to break, though, because it is so thin. It almost feels like plastic when you pick it up, because you can't imagine glass could be this thin. But these actually date back as early as the 1930s. $28 each is a pretty good deal on these. If you were able to put them out on eBay and identify them, there's definitely some room in that. This is one of the more unusual metal frames I've seen. This castle with this young married couple in it. From about 1920, it is priced at $195. That's a really neat piece. And we're in Florida, so of course anything vintage Disney. These are from about 1970. Think of when Irish coffee mugs started to come into the market. And that's about what you have here with these little pedestals, priced at $18 each now. These Victorian sewing implements are particularly desirable, and they've been pricey ever since I've been in the business. The agate-handled iron tape measure is a really unusual piece because of the materials and the fact that someone did something so fancy, and that is priced at $195. The little pin cushion in the walnut surround is early 1900s, probably made in England, and seems to be priced around $50. Now, we can't prove that Steven Spielberg owned these and drank out of them, but we do know that William Yoward crystal is valuable and expensive and in the province of the wealthy, so look for that name. These are priced at $79 each. What a nice collection of little ceramic clocks. These all date to about 1900, 1910, except for the Lenox in the back, which is a recent vintage continuation of that style. The metal piece here at $58 is actually pretty well priced if it works. A lot of these small ones do not work anymore, and the problem is that they were made in Europe. The movements are just not really fixable anymore. So you want to make sure these work, but they have some really beautiful surrounds. Cast iron toys from the early 1900s are still very desirable, and this one is priced at $65. Railroads were the way people got around then, so very important for a kid to have his own railroad. And wow, a bunch more of the Dutchware. This is a really fun collection. The big jardinières, the pitchers. So I guess that answers the question. It wasn't the juvenile line because they did all sorts of pieces. This big tankard over here, the oval bowl, these pieces here, even a casserole. We only have the lid here. Great to see a lot of one item so you can really see the variety there is to collect. Fenton is hot again. This pretty piece is one of their later artware pieces. It is signed, priced at $125. Let's see if it's the signature of someone we met at the Fenton convention this year. It is not, but it does have the Fenton label. This one with the pretty blue bells does not seem to have a signature. That's interesting. I don't really run into a lot of unsigned painted pieces of Fenton. It's priced at $42. That's an interesting mystery. We'll have to see if any of our decorators recognize the strokes in this painting and can identify the designer or decorator for us. I have always loved this capri blue color. It came in entire dinnerware sets, and I'll take it out so you can see how happy and bright it is. Another thing that just reminds me of Florida with that turquoise watery color. These are not expensive either. You can do a collection pretty reasonably and they're good quality. If you don't live in Florida where the phosphates are a problem, you can even put them in the dishwasher. One nice thing about being in the antique business right there. Mass tea seal, 1 quart. I'm not sure how excited I am by having dairy products by a company of this name, but it does say it is the greatest value in food. So maybe I'm wrong, 1995. It's so nice to see a lot of the Dresden lace figurines and to see them in such good condition with none of the lace broken. Some of them are quite intricate. This woman with the children and the lamb is $210. The couple dancing are $165. The women at the mirror, $195. That seems like a very reasonable price, really. And then we have the piano player in the back. They would use real lace, dip it, fold it, and then when they fired it, the porcelain would remain and the lace would burn off. So it's as delicate as you can imagine. In fact, I see a hole in the skirt of the women at the mirror. I guess that's why it's only $195. Hello. Nothing like a cranberry Fenton piece in the sun. Unless you prefer modernism, in which case there's nothing like a couple of Viking birds in the sun. In front of a tom-tom, the Piper's Son Shawnee teapot from their Whimsy era, $65. Real police badges can be expensive now, especially older ones, especially from certain places. You cannot sell this on eBay. They're concerned about people using them for scurrilous reasons. Some of the prices on these are pretty big, but that's because the people wearing them were pretty big. I mean, you have one, for example, that got to be the police at the Century of Progress World's Fair in Chicago. That piece worth somewhere in the $400 range to the right buyer. I love this piece of Roseville Futura. I would certainly love to own a piece of that again. It's been a long time. You don't see this pattern often. It came out right on the eve of the Depression. It was very modernist, a lot of great styles. You should definitely take a look at the old Roseville Collector's Guide if you can get one and see all the different things they made in that pattern. Because every so often one slips through. They are not generally marked Roseville. From the early 1900s comes this amazing mermaid lamp. I have never seen one like it before. It's porcelain. Look at the figures. You can see by the thickness of the beveled glass, again, that this is an older piece. So there's no question of the age. Also, just the detail in the way they're painted. And frankly, the fact that they're just a little thicker in the middle than you might expect to have been the fashion of 1950s and 60s mermaids who had to compete with Twiggy. You know, if you're going to repurpose, have a purpose to your repurposing. And whoever did this did a really great job because they took an original 1910s washstand pitcher and bowl and the rest of the set. Also, it's got the little soap dish and the toothbrush holder and a mug and a little pitcher. And they painted a piece of furniture to be the washstand pitcher stand, and it matches. I think that's very, very clever. Obviously, the flowers are not exactly the same, but the color and the tone, it's like toileware. I just find this very attractive. So repurposing should have a purpose, and in this case, the washstand with all the accessories is $295. This is Karlsruhe Majolica from Germany. This is going to date on the later end. You might be able to see a mark under there. This will be on the later end of Majolica production. Germany kept producing Majolica pretty much through the First World War, and they were about the last to produce the original era of Majolica. Here's a Cherokee basket from North Carolina. If you learn your weaves on old basketry, you can find old pieces like this. This probably dates to about 1900. It could even be a little earlier. It's not in perfect condition, but it's hard to find these anymore. This one is priced at $75 in the condition it's in. It would have been to gather apples. And this is another one from the Cherokee, North Carolina area. A little more recent vintage. Note the use of nails. This one is priced at $35, also a little bit as is. If you're shooting some film noir, or you just want to change your identity, you could become Dr. Vaughn with this original 1920s reverse painted sign probably from a transom window above the door to the office is what I would imagine, priced at $195. This Celtic harp with its case is not wildly old, but it's only $95, which seems like a very good price for almost any musical instrument these days. We see so much from the First and Second World War that we rarely pay attention to Militaria from the time between the wars, but there were a lot of advancements going on, particularly in terms of air flight. This is a 1920s naval pilot helmet. with Mark II pilot goggles. And that set is priced together at $325. It's hard to find these. Nice old churn here for $325. Hall Brothers of West Acton, Massachusetts. This is going to date to about 1900. It's got all of the stuff you need to actually churn yourself some butter. And with the price of butter going up these days, maybe it's time to learn how to do that. This lucite and chrome lamp actually has a really interesting base, and with a good shade on it, which is what it needs. It's definitely vintage, looks like about 1950. It's only priced at $85. I'm tempted to get it and try to find an appropriate shade and take it to West Palm Beach with me. So I'm going to look for a shade first and then see if this piece is still here. Look at this row of these bottle stoppers that drink and drum. Whoa! That one falls to the floor, but thankfully I didn't break it, so he can still make his phone call. This guy's just riding it out. And this one here, I believe, is the signalman telling you it might be time to stop. Oh, nope, it says it's time to go. Have another drink. These are really fun. Bottle stoppers like this have been very collectible for a long time. They're selling these as 6 pieces together for $45. Which is a pretty good deal, although the 6th one seems to be missing, so I'll have to see if that's sitting around here somewhere. And there's a whole shelf full of Shawnee, Smiley, and Winnie Pig. Winnie in her finery out on the town. Smiley is in his overalls and his bib for farming. Now these two here are not old. Let's see if we can see who they are. Department 56, made in China. This is one thing about collectibles. Know your old stuff, because if it's good and people start to really like it, there may be new things that start to kind of look like it popping around. And if you know your old stuff, you won't be confused. Your customers won't be confused. They'll keep buying from you because they'll be confident that you have the knowledge. None of us knows everything about antiques and vintage. There's always something to learn, which is really cool. I get very frustrated when I see people hold something up and go, I don't know what this is, but it's for sale. It potentially does a real disservice to your collector, because you as the seller owe it to your collector to know that what you're selling them is genuine, that it's not a fake, that it's not a reproduction. It's just really important to know something about the merchandise, especially because not just for the connoisseurship, but because you will make more money if you're a reseller, if you properly describe these things and put them in the right categories and reach the right collectors. This gal was just in stocking, and I let her do it so that I wouldn't interrupt her. She has really nice linens. I like the way she presents them very much. This is 1940s here. Some very pretty embroidery here. Only $6.99 on the pillowcase, and she's done all of the laundering for you. I have to say, I think her prices are really great. This is an old piece of a quilt top with the rings for $18.99. And an old child's baby quilt in here for $24.99. Here's the rich red roses for your tablecloth. So she's got a nice selection. $2 each for these placemats. I mean, that's just amazingly inexpensive. And then on the end here, she has a very cute 1950s gown for $79 near this large, colorful mid-century tapestry, either from France or Belgium. Russian nesting dolls. These have a little bit of age, and the prices are good, in the $20 to $30 range. This is a hard guy to find here. This is American Bisque. This is the Roly-Poly Captain Cookie Jar. The paint's a little bit worn because it's cold paint on the surface, but you never see Mr. Roly-Poly, and he's priced at $149. And a couple of more really pretty chenille blankets. I like the color in this one. And what do we have this priced? $49.99. When you think of how expensive new linens and bedding are, I don't really know why any of this old stuff is not being used. Even if you just use it as a topper, I realize that people like king and queen size beds, but a lot of these older pieces are great as a top layer for design on top of some plain cover that you use underneath. I mean, for heaven's sakes, if they can put a strip of fabric on the end of a motel bed now, which seems to be the style, then certainly we can find ways to use these smaller linens in a way that's useful and effective for our use today. Very pretty Italian chandelier priced at $145. A lot of these went into Florida homes in the 1970s and are coming out now, which is a shame because 5 or 10 years ago, putting these back into homes was suddenly very popular, and now they're coming out again. I think it's a great look. And for people who really like floral and naturalistic looks, which are supposed to be coming back into style, the idea of having indoor plants is becoming fashionable again. So I think we're going to see things like this pick up again, and $145 seems like a good price today to maybe set aside to sell tomorrow. The Betsy Ross was a very hoary and stalwart child sewing machine. She has 49 on it, and that's about the right price for these. I haven't had one for a while, but that's what I got for my last one. And you can tell she really takes time with her display. I like the way that she uses the old floral postcards as a backing. Old pictures of people. It just sets a tone. None of this stuff is expensive. She didn't have to spend a lot of money to do these as backdrops, and they're all for sale, so she can get her money back. But it just makes the objects on the shelf sort of seem a little more cohesive. And again, her prices, some of these are really good. These mottos seem very inexpensive. 3 of them are to Mother. That was very popular around 1920 when the motto started to become popular. This one is for your friend. That one probably dates to about 1940 or 50, right about the end of motto collecting. This one's going to be in between, and that's got a very pretty floral print and a nice saying about the folks we like to know. Again, for $6, good prices on these. And for $16.99, this is a very nice piece. Now, these do sometimes get runs. They're made of silk. Overall, the condition is pretty good, though. And what great color. How fun would that be to work into a display? That could absolutely go boho if you styled it right. Well, I knew I couldn't get out of there without buying something. In fact, there's a bunch more I'm going to go back for, but I'm putting this cover lid in the car. I'm really having fun being back in Florida, and if you enjoyed this video, check out this one. Also, click thumbs up to like this video and check the description for information about our Patreon, our memberships. We've got a lot of different levels with different perks and bonus videos and early content. Also, please do check out our website, theantiquenomad.com, for appraisal help, and we'll see you again for more adventures in the antique and vintage community soon. Bye for now.